So I'm Gareth Harding, the director of the Missouri School of Journalism's Brussels program. I don't downplay Brussels, but it is not Prague or Paris or Barcelona or even perhaps Ljubljana or San Sebastian, where, beautiful places which just hit you with a whack immediately. And you've got these incredible sights to see, whether it's big mountains or beautiful beaches or world famous architecture. Brussels is more of a slow burner. It has its sights, some of which are extraordinary, but I think it's more the fact that it's a livable city. So it's a place you want to hang out in for weeks and months. And after time, it really grows on you, like moss. And then it kind of becomes difficult to leave. So we find that the students, by the end of their time, are really into the sort of European living groove in Brussels. And they they know their own favorite pastry shops and bars, and they got their little, ways of walking to work, which makes it really unique. Well, I tell students that you don't have to be political to come to Brussels. You don't have to be going off on marches every weekend and register for as a Democrat or a Republican. But it's useful to be interested in politics, because a lot of the internships and the classes revolve around essentially EU politics, it being the headquarters of the EU. So if you're doing an internship at someone like Politico or Euronews, and you don't understand and you don't care how the EU works, and you don't care for politics or politicians, it's going to make your job very difficult. Likewise, if you work in a communications company and you're working for clients who revolve around the EU, again, if you don't understand the difference between the institutions or anything about the EU, it'll be hard to do your job properly. So for those who sort of think that, well, politics is all about divisiveness and partisanship and, Trump v. Biden, two old blokes fighting it out. It's not like that at all, really. I think in Europe we have differences, clearly, but in general it's not quite so divisive. There's a lot of common ground amongst mainstream political parties, at least. I don't know why this misconception has arisen that it's a kind of reporting program and not Stratcom. I will say until I'm blue in the face that it's both, because I'm both as well. I mean, I flip-flop between journalism and communication. I even own my own agency, if you want, and my own media and communication training company, as well as doing some writing and teaching. So for me, Stratcom students are more than welcome, and we have some great internships with them. Plus the class is partly about EU communication, and the assignment in terms of drawing up a communication strategy or a social media plan. So we have internships at places, big agencies, comms, PR agencies like Fleischmann Hillard, in the past at Hill & Knowlton and FTI, at BCW, Burson Cohen Wolf, also with NGOs, non-profits, think tanks, and some corporates. So in the past at Swift and Procter & Gamble and Coca-Cola and so on. So we can definitely find great internships for those who want to work in public relations, public affairs, comms, marketing, social media, digital strategy, all that. Although we're not so hot perhaps on strict advertising. So if you're looking for an advertising job or internship, maybe London has more opportunities, maybe New York, not so much Brussels. But Brussels is a great place to be a reporter. I was one for at least 10 years. It's one of the biggest reporting capitals in the world. I think fourth or fifth biggest press corps, international press corps, with around 900 journalists. So it's a real hot spot for journalists, mainly because they're attracted to news coming out of the EU, NATO, but also Belgium and other pan-European issues. So we have some pretty killer internships on the reporting side, notably Politico Europe, which has its European headquarters in Brussels. In the past, we've had a lot of students going to Reuters, both on the TV and the print side. And then there's a lot of publications which may not be so well known to an American audience, but which are big in Brussels, like Euractiv, Brussels Times, more on the kind of more lifestyle expat side. MLEX, a regulatory affairs outlet, and Parliament Magazine. So we've got lots and lots of excellent reporting jobs, and the journalists, or the student journalists, will be acting as junior reporters, going out there and asking questions to ministers and prime ministers sometimes in the past, or even Justin Bieber or Usain Bolt. So it's a great place to be a reporter. But there's no language requirement for the Brussels program, unlike Barcelona, but every language counts. So if you speak a bit of French, that's obviously good professionally, but it's also polite socially, just to be able to say bonjour or merci when you're in a supermarket. Apart from that, German, I would say, would be the next most useful. We've actually got a native German-speaking student out there now, and he says it's very, very useful. I'd love us to have one day a Dutch native speaker, Dutch being the main language in Belgium, actually. Not so much in Brussels, but certainly in the whole country. Spanish, not so useful in Brussels, but every language can be. We've had certainly Mandarin native speakers there before, and even there we found internships where they're working in Chinese, so everything's useful. So Belgium is a really underrated country. I underrated it for at least 25 of the 30 years I was there, and really discovered it during lockdown. And then you realize that in a tiny place, I mean much smaller than Missouri, I'm imagining, you've got world-class cities, and I mean world-class, like Antwerp and Ghent. Beautiful old historic cities like Bruges. Also some really nice Walloon cities, so in the southern French part of the country, French-speaking part of the country, like Bouillon and Mons and Tournai. So it's a really, really interesting place as well. I mean, partly because of that split between the French-speaking and Dutch-speaking, partly because it's been overrun by forces for centuries. So historically, it's an important and interesting place. And it's also well situated to see the rest of Europe from. Paris, London, Amsterdam within 2 hours train journey. Typically, students will go to those places. Maybe some other places nearby like Cologne, Luxembourg, Lille. And then once or twice, or at least that's what I encourage them, more like 3 or 4 times, they'll go to other places like Prague is a favorite, for all good reasons, Barcelona, Dublin, Switzerland, Italy, Rome, Greece. Really it's a kind of smorgasbord of interest, because within 3 hours flight you've got pretty much all the great cities of Europe. Amazingly, the weather in Brussels is getting better due to climate change. Not necessarily a good thing, but it's certainly less rainy and warmer than it was even 10 years ago. That said, there are better times to come to Brussels if you're, worried about your tan than others. So spring is a little bit of a misnomer, if we're honest. It's pretty much midwinter in January and February when students arrive. It then starts warming up in March and April. So those who arrive in May are coming at probably the peak time. So the summer is gorgeous. It's not too hot, certainly for those who are used to Texas or Missouri in the summer. It's the time of festivals, sitting out in cafes and bars, and going off into the woods and on walks and picnics and cycling and kayaking and so on. Fall is also very clement. It's a great time to be there because potentially you can spend a bit of time before in the summer. In September and October it's usually relatively warm still, and the days are long. And then it starts getting a little bit cooler in October, November, but by the time students leave in early December, it's still not too cold. So I get a good measure of how the students are doing from weekly reports which they send, but the most important for me is the end of term or end of semester report. And those are always gratifying because I would say in at least 90% of the cases, we're getting stuff like, this was the best time of my life, thanks so much for an incredible semester, I've grown so much, I've learned so much, I've expanded my horizons. I did stuff I never thought I could do, like get public transport in Paris. I feel so much more confident about myself. So I think studying abroad in general is a great thing to do because it just expands your horizons, opens up new possibilities, and is a sort of open air, real world classroom. Like, I think all study abroad is great. It enriches the mind, enlarges horizons, and we've got a great offer here at Missouri. But I think what makes Brussels stand out is the fact that it's probably the most political internship, because Brussels is kind of the capital of the EU and headquarters of NATO. It's probably the best place to see Europe from, because Brussels is close to Amsterdam, London, Paris, Germany. Also because I think Brussels is a really cool city and Belgium is a really cool country, often very much underestimated. So it's a good chance to kind of see mini Europe if you want to live the European life and be surrounded by cobbled streets and cafes and bars and cinemas around the corner and taking public transport, and plus somewhere which is very manageable and not too overwhelming, because it's not such a gigantic metropolis as New York or London, and not nearly as expensive.